I still remember the fear in Bamy's eyes as we stumbled through the darkness, the moonlight barely guiding our way. Oba's furious cries echoed behind us, growing louder with each passing moment. My body felt heavy, my tail dragging across the rough ground, each movement sending jolts of pain through me. I couldn't survive long without water, but Bamy refused to give up on me. "Just a little further, Ripple," he whispered, his voice trembling with both determination and fear. I clung to his words, hoping they were true. The forest we entered was alive with shadows and strange sounds, but it offered us a fragile sanctuary. My strength was waning fast, and I could feel the dryness tightening my scales. "Bamy," I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. "I need water, please." His face twisted in anguish as he knelt beside me. "I'll find a way," he said firmly, though I could see the doubt flickering in his eyes. The world around me blurred, the forest spinning as my strength ebbed away. As I lay on the cool forest floor, I thought of my home beneath the waves, the vibrant corals, and the soothing currents. My heart ached, not just for the sea, but for the safety it promised. "I shouldn't have come to your world," I murmured, my voice cracking. Bamy shook his head fiercely. "Don't say that, Ripple. You belong here now. You are my friend, and I won't let anything happen to you." His words were like a small flame in the overwhelming darkness. Footsteps, heavy, relentless, and getting closer. Oba and his fishermen were hunting us, their torches casting eerie flickers of light in the distance. Bamy tensed, his hand tightening around mine. "They won't find us," he promised, though his voice betrayed his fear. I could hear their voices, shouting my name, cursing me as a monster. A shiver ran through me. What had I done to deserve their hatred? I wasn't a monster, I was just a girl from the sea, lost in a world that didn't understand me. Bamy helped me to my feet, rather. He half carried me as my tail dragged behind. Every step felt like an eternity, my body screaming for water. "Here is a river nearby," he said, more to himself than to me. I wanted to believe him, but my vision was dimming, my strength slipping away. "Don't give up on me, Ripple," he urged. His desperation was palpable, and it was the only thing keeping me conscious. I had to trust him. We stumbled forward, the forest thinning as we approached the riverbank. The sound of water was faint but unmistakable. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. Oba's angry voice boomed closer than ever. "Find them! She can't have gone far." My heart sank. Bamy's grip tightened on my arm. "We'll make it," he said, though I wasn't sure if he was convincing me or himself. As the river came into view, hope flickered once more, fragile but alive. Oba's fury was a storm that seemed impossible to escape. From the safety of the shadows, Bamy and I could see him gathering the other fishermen, his voice sharp and commanding. "That creature cannot be allowed to live." He roared, holding his spear high as though he were a warrior about to go into battle. I shivered at the sight of him, my scales prickling with fear. The other fishermen murmured in agreement, their torches blazing as they spread out to begin their search. Bamy pulled me deeper into the forest, his grip firm but gentle. "We need to stay quiet," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder at the flickering lights drawing closer. My body felt like a weight he could barely carry, but he refused to let me stop. "Why do they hate me so much?" I asked, my voice trembling. He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "They're afraid of what they don't understand," he said simply. "But I understand you, Ripple. That's why I'll protect you." The fishermen moved with frightening precision, their shouts cutting through the night like knives. "She can't hide forever," one of them called out, his voice filled with hatred. My heart sank as I realized how determined they were. Bamy crouched beside me behind a large tree, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "I need to think," he murmured, his eyes scanning the area. Despite his calm tone, I could see the fear etched into his face. Oba's voice rang out again, his frustration growing. "Search the riverbank. She needs water to survive." My blood ran cold. He was right, I couldn't last much longer without it. Bamy's gaze darted to me, his expression conflicted. "Ripple, I'll get you to the river, I promise, but you have to trust me." I nodded weakly, though I wasn't sure I believed him. The fear of being caught was almost as overwhelming as my need for water. The flickering lights of the fishermen's torches danced closer, casting eerie shadows across the forest floor. I could hear their footsteps crunching through the underbrush, coming dangerously close to where we were hiding. Bamy's grip on my arm tightened as he whispered, "Stay here." Before I could protest, he slipped away, his figure blending into the darkness. My heart pounded as I watched him go, the fear of being left alone almost too much to bear. Moments stretched into eternity as I waited, each sound amplifying my anxiety. Suddenly, a sharp cry rang out, followed by laughter, Oba's laughter. "You thought you could hide from me?" he sneered. My stomach dropped as I realized they had caught sight of Bamy. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay hidden. I didn't know what Bamy was planning, but I had to trust that he would find a way to save us both. Bamy stumbled into the clearing, his arms raised as the fishermen encircled him. Their torches illuminated his defiance, but fear flickered in his eyes. "I don't know where she is," he insisted, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Oba stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. "Do you think I am a fool? You've been hiding her," he bellowed, gripping his spear tighter. I watched from my hiding spot, my heart sinking, as I realized Bamy was risking his life for me. The fishermen didn't wait for Bamy to explain further. They bound his hands and dragged him toward the riverbank, their voices a mix of anger and triumph. I crept silently behind them, my body weak but my determination growing. My fins brushed against the rough ground, and every step was agony, but I couldn't leave him to face Oba's wrath alone. The river was close now. I could feel its energy calling to me, urging me forward. As they reached the riverbank, Oba barked out orders. "Search the area. She's here. I can feel it." The fishermen scattered, their torches casting long shadows on the water's surface. I pressed myself against a tree, watching as Bamy struggled against his restraints. "You are wasting your time," he said, his voice laced with frustration. Oba ignored him, his eyes scanning the darkness with a predatory gleam. My heart raced as I realized they were moments away from finding me. Desperation gripped me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I began to hum a soft, haunting melody, my voice carrying over the stillness of the river. The fishermen froze, their heads turning toward the sound. The melody grew louder, filling the air with a strange, otherworldly energy. For a moment, it seemed to work. The men looked dazed, their weapons lowering. But Oba shook his head fiercely, breaking free from the song's spell. "It's her," he shouted, pointing in my direction. The fishermen charged toward me, their torches blazing like fireflies in the night. My body trembled as I tried to move, but my strength was fading fast. Oba reached me first, his spear raised high. "You thought you could escape," he snarled, his voice dripping with triumph. Before I could respond, Bamy shouted from behind him, "Leave her alone, she's done nothing wrong." His voice was filled with a desperation that mirrored my own. Oba turned toward Bamy, his expression dark. "You've always been soft, Bamy," he spat, "but softness won't save you now." He motioned for the other fishermen to restrain me, their rough hands gripping my arms. Tears streamed down my face as I struggled against them, my mind racing for a way out. Bamy's eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of determination. He wasn't giving up, and neither could I. Whatever happened next, I knew we had to face it together. Nightfall draped the forest in shadows as the fishermen celebrated their victory. I was bound tightly, the ropes digging into my delicate skin as I lay helpless on the ground. Oba's laughter echoed in the stillness, his eyes gleaming with malice. Bamy sat a short distance away, tied to a wooden post, his face etched with worry. Despite his predicament, his gaze never left me. "We have to escape," he whispered hoarsely, his determination cutting through the fear in his voice. Just as I was losing hope, a familiar figure crept into the clearing. It was Oba's younger brother, his steps cautious but deliberate. He knelt beside Bamy, producing a small blade from his waistband. "You'll get us both killed," Bamy hissed, his voice barely audible. "I can't stand by and watch this," the younger brother replied, his hands working quickly to cut through the ropes. With a final snap, Bamy was free. "What's the plan?" the younger brother asked, his voice trembling slightly. Bamy glanced toward me, his eyes narrowing as he formulated a plan. "We need to put them to sleep," he said, rummaging through a small pouch hidden in his waistband. He pulled out a handful of powder, its faint floral scent wafting in the air. "Sleeping powder," he explained to his brother. "Scatter it near the fire and make sure it mixes with the smoke." His brother hesitated for a moment but nodded, slipping away into the shadows with the pouch in hand. The fishermen continued their boisterous celebration, completely unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Oba stood by the fire, recounting tales of his supposed bravery, while the others laughed and cheered. I watched as Bamy's brother stealthily approached the fire, his movements silent and precise. He sprinkled the powder into the flames, retreating quickly as the smoke began to shift. It grew thicker, heavier, and carried a sweet, almost hypnotic aroma that enveloped the clearing. One by one, the fishermen's laughter faded into yawns. Their movements slowed, their eyes growing heavy as the powder took effect. Oba fought against it, his body swaying as he tried to remain alert. "What? "What is this?" he slurred, his words barely coherent. Finally he collapsed, his spear falling from his grasp. The forest fell silent, the only sound being the crackling of the fire. Bamy emerged from the shadows, his face resolute as he hurried toward me. Bamy knelt beside me, his hands working furiously to untie the ropes that bound me. "I told you I wouldn't leave you," he whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and urgency. As the last knot came undone, I fell into his arms, my strength nearly gone. "We need to leave now," he said, helping me to my feet. Before disappearing into the night, Bamy turned to his brother, who stood watching from the edge of the clearing. "Go home," Bamy instructed. "You've done enough. Don't let Oba take his anger out on you." His brother hesitated but finally nodded, slipping away into the forest. The night air was thick with tension as Bamy supported my frail body through the dense forest. My strength waned with each step, and I could feel the weight of my captivity dragging on me. "Hold on, Ripple," Bamy whispered, his voice steady despite the urgency in his steps. The forest felt endless, its shadows stretching and morphing with every flicker of moonlight. Behind us, the faint sound of snores from the fisherman gave us hope that the sleeping powder was still holding its effect. As we pressed forward, I clung tightly to Bamy's arm, my breathing laboured. "We need to reach the river," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Bamy nodded without hesitation, his grip on me tightening as he navigated the uneven terrain. Despite his determination, I could see the fear in his eyes, the fear that we might not make it in time. The forest seemed to close in around us, each rustling leaf and snapping twig amplifying the silence. Suddenly, the sound of a twig snapping behind us froze us in our tracks. Bamy spun around, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Someone's coming," he whispered, his voice barely audible. My heart raced as we crouched low behind a cluster of thick bushes. Moments later, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was Oba, his movements sluggish, but his determination unyielding. "You won't get away," he growled, gripping his spear tightly as he stumbled closer. Bamy's jaw tightened as he placed himself between Oba and me. "Stay behind me," he instructed, his voice firm. Oba's gaze shifted to me, a wicked smile spreading across his face. "You think you can escape, little fish?" he sneered. Bamy stepped forward, his stance defensive. "Leave her alone, Oba. You've done enough harm," he said, his voice unwavering. Oba lunged, his spear aimed at Bamy, but Bamy was quicker, dodging the attack and knocking the spear from his grasp. The struggle was brief but intense. Bamy managed to overpower Oba, pinning him to the ground. "Go," he shouted to me, his eyes filled with urgency. I hesitated, fear gripping me as I watched the scene unfold, but Bamy's voice cut through my hesitation. "Ripple, you need to go now," he yelled, his voice laced with desperation. Summoning what little strength I had left, I turned and fled toward the faint sound of rushing water in the distance. Reaching the riverbank felt like a miracle. The cool water lapped at my feet as I collapsed to the ground, my body trembling from exhaustion. I turned back, my heart sinking, as I realized Bamy was still in the forest. Moments later, I saw him emerge from the trees, battered but victorious. He stumbled toward me, a relieved smile on his face. "I told you I wouldn't let anything happen to you," he said, his voice soft but resolute. Together, we waded into the river, the water washing away the fear and pain of the night. The river welcomed me like a long-lost friend, its cool embrace rejuvenating my weakened body. As I submerged, a sense of relief coursed through me, but it was short-lived. The water around us began to ripple violently, and I looked up to see figures breaking the surface. My heart froze as I recognized my father and a group of mermaids, their expressions fierce and unforgiving. They surrounded Bamy and me, their tridents raised as though ready to strike. "Ripple, who is this human, and why does he dare to pollute our waters?" my father bellowed, his voice echoing through the depths. I swam in front of Bamy, shielding him from their wrath. "Father, stop! He saved me! He's not like the others!" I pleaded. The other mermaids hissed and murmured among themselves, their skepticism evident. My father's eyes narrowed as he approached us, his towering figure casting a shadow over Bamy. Bamy remained silent, his gaze steady despite the danger. My father studied him, then turned to me. "Ripple, humans are not to be trusted. They have hunted and hurt us for generations," he said, his voice filled with both anger and sorrow. "And yet, he risked his life to save mine," I countered, my voice firm. Would a true enemy show such bravery? The tension hung heavy in the water as my father's expression softened, though his wariness remained. The mermaids behind him began to whisper, their voices a mix of curiosity and doubt. "What if she's right?" one of them murmured. Another shook her head. "Humans cannot change." My father raised his hand, silencing them. He turned to Bamy, his eyes searching for something truth, perhaps, or courage. "You saved my daughter," he said slowly, his tone measured. "But that does not make you one of us." Bamy nodded, his voice calm as he replied, "I ask for nothing, only her safety." My father's gaze softened further, and he sighed deeply. "If you are to remain in our waters, you must abide by our ways," he said. With a wave of his hand, he summoned a small, shimmering orb of light. "Bamy, I will grant you the ability to breathe underwater, but only because Ripple vouches for you. Use this gift wisely." The orb floated toward Bamy, enveloping him in a soft glow. He gasped as the magic worked its way through him, his lungs adapting to the water around us. As the glow faded, Bamy looked at me with awe and gratitude. "Ripple," he said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming moment. "Thank you." I smiled, relief washing over me as I saw the trust forming between him and my father. "Let us return home," my father said, his tone heavy with both weariness and resolve. As we swam deeper into the sea, I felt a mix of hope and dread. The home I left behind was not the same, and I knew the challenges ahead would test me like never before. The once vibrant kingdom I had left was unrecognizable. The coral towers stood dull and cracked, their colors faded like a forgotten memory. Schools of fish that once danced through the currents were gone, leaving an eerie silence in their place. As we approached the grand palace, my heart sank further. The golden gates, which used to glisten under the sunlight streaming through the water, hung ajar, their luster dulled by neglect. My father swam ahead, his shoulders heavy with the weight of what awaited us. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was somber. Mermaids swam quietly, their faces etched with worry and despair. In the grand hall, I saw Hermy Mother, the queenlying on a bed of shimmering seaweed, her radiant beauty dimmed by illness. I rushed to her side, tears streaming down my face. "Mother," I whispered, my voice trembling. Her eyes fluttered open, and a faint smile graced her lips. "Ripple," she said weakly, her voice barely audible, "you've returned." I held her hand tightly as she spoke, her words laboured but filled with urgency. "Our kingdom is in chaos," she began. "Rival mermaids, they seek to take the throne and destroy the balance between us and the humans." Her gaze grew distant, and I could see the pain in her eyes. "You must be strong, Ripple. You are the heir to the throne, the only one who can restore peace." Her words hit me like a wave, and I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. "But, Mother," I protested, my voice cracking, "I am not ready. I don't know how to lead a kingdom." She gave a weak laugh, her smile bittersweet. "No one is ever truly ready, my child. Leadership is not about being perfect. It's about doing what is right, even when it is difficult." Her words resonated deep within me, but the doubt lingered. I had always dreamed of a simple life, free of burdens and expectations. Now that dream seemed like a distant shore, unreachable and fleeting. Her grip on my hand tightened as she continued. "There is a prophecy," she said, her voice growing weaker. "A golden queen will rise to unite our people and protect the harmony between the sea and the land. Ripple, that queen, it must be you." My heart raced as the enormity of her words sank in. But how? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. She gave me one last smile, her eyes glistening with both hope and sorrow. "The answer lies in the golden bracelet," she said. Ripple knelt by her mother's side, her tears merging with the shimmering droplets of the sea. "Mother, I shouldn't have left you." She wept. "I should have stayed and spent every moment I had with you. I can't bear the pain of losing you. Please don't leave me." Her mother, though weak, smiled softly, her voice as gentle as the ebbing tide. "My precious Ripple, you've given me more joy than I ever dreamed. Don't regret your journey. It was meant to shape you. Live boldly, share your light, and remember, I'll always be with you in the waves and the wind." With her final breath, my mother whispered, "Protect them, Ripple. Protect them all." Her hand fell limp in mine, and the room fell silent. I closed my eyes, my tears mingling with the salt water around me. The weight of her final words pressed heavily on my heart. As I looked around the room, I saw the uncertainty in the faces of those gathered. My father placed a hand on my shoulder, his expression grave. "The kingdom needs you now, Ripple," he said softly. I nodded, steeling myself for the challenges ahead. To be continued. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, please like and subscribe so you won't miss it.